It's been an emotional 24 hours in South Carolina, where yesterday morning the Confederate flag was removed from the front of the State House in Columbia. More than 100 people watched the historic ceremony yesterday, much more than 100 people, and a national audience on television, too. Flag is now housed nearby at a Confederate relic museum. Flagpole was also removed yesterday from the State House grounds. This came a day after South Carolina's Republican Governor Nikki Haley signed that bill into law calling for the removal of the flag. And it also came less than a month after the racist murders of 9 members of a black church in Charleston, South Carolina, by a man who embraced the Confederate flag. Not long after that flag came down yesterday, the director of the FBI revealed that the gun used in the Charleston church shooting never should have been sold to the gunman in the first place. James Comey revealing that Dylan Roof's criminal history didn't make it into the FBI's database. If it had, that would have prohibited his purchase of the gun. Instead, Roof got his gun because federal law allows a gun sale to go ahead if the FBI hasn't blocked it. Now, in previous elections, Democrats have often appeared timid on tackling gun control as part of their campaigns. But ever since the Charleston shooting, Hillary Clinton has been talking about toughening the nation's gun laws, including this week in Iowa.
I think it's pretty clear that a majority of Americans and a majority of gun owners agree with universal background checks to keep guns out of the hands of domestic abusers and people who are mentally unready and unstable, and even terrorists, because right now we can't even stop that in a lot of the parts of the country. So let's get back to having a conversation. Let's not be afraid of the gun lobby, which does not even really represent the majority of gun owners in America.
Now, this is a shift in emphasis that helps the former Secretary of State stake out the more liberal ground of her closest challenger, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. Except on this issue, she could be standing out there alone, because when it comes to guns, Sanders isn't your typical liberal. He represents a rural pro-gun state. He's voted in the past for legislation that protects the gun industry. And Thursday, in Virginia, Sanders argued with a member of the audience over whether gun manufacturers should be held liable.
If somebody has a gun and somebody steals that gun and they shoot somebody, do you really think it makes sense to blame the manufacturer of that weapon?
Yes, and I'll tell you why.
No,
because
you could tell. I don't.
Smart gun technology that would prevent.
We would like other people to get a chance.
The point is that I made: if somebody sells you a baseball bat and you hit somebody over the head, you're not going to sue the baseball bat manufacturer.
So interesting to hear. I mean, he is making the guns don't kill people, people kill people line that you always hear from the NRA. And this is Bernie Sanders. And this is the one issue people always look at it and they say he's to the left of Hillary on everything, on taxes, on that. Not when it comes to guns.
Well, again, it goes back to Hillary Clinton's problem as Bernie Sanders presents her with the challenge of advocating for ever more government, basically, except perhaps in this case. On Bernie Sanders' part. We have an ineffective government apparatus. This was a failure of the background check system. So the background check was in place and didn't work. Why? Because it's not being administered properly.
Well, if I could, I mean, part of the problem here was that there is this prioritization over the speed of someone being able to get their gun in 3 days versus the thoroughness of the background check. So if the person at the FBI had more time because she was trying to find the information, if there had been more time to find that information, then Dylan Roof wouldn't have been able to get a gun. So I think it speaks to the fact that we've prioritized the ability of people to get a gun and really leaning on the side of anyone being able to get a gun over having a thorough background check system. And there's also another piece here, which is a lot of reluctance among the pro-gun community to give any information about who owns guns and their background and their history to the federal government that makes it very hard to have an effective background check system.
And this is actually shows that this particular tragic incident is a case study in how something can people who are already anti-new gun laws and people who are already wanting more restrictions and more controls on who gets a gun, both sides can look at what happened and see that they have a legitimate concern and their position is legitimate. And also, this incident, I don't think is going to create any momentum, real momentum to actually do something, let's say in South Carolina, where Nikki Haley, a Republican governor, was the one who led the charge to bring down the Confederate flag.
Right.
But on guns, she's very clear, and in the past she's supported legislation that would make it easier for people to get guns, and you wouldn't even have to get a permit or training to get a gun. So this isn't really going to change the conversation any more than any other incident, I think.
I wonder what you think, though, of what Bernie Sanders is trying to do here, and it reminds me so much. We're always drawing comparisons between him and Howard Dean, and they're both from Vermont. They both sort of ran to the left.
Yeah.
But that was the issue also where Howard Dean was sort of at odds with the Democratic base. And Howard Dean's point when he ran for president 12 years ago, and Bernie Sanders, when you listen to him, is making the same argument now. He's basically saying the idea of having national policy on guns doesn't make sense because a gun means something very different. In Vermont, he's saying, where in Vermont it's used for hunting, it's used for food on the table. He said, in a city like Chicago, where you're seeing it every weekend, it's killing people. It's being used differently. And he's saying we have to have a political discussion that reflects that. I wonder what you think of that.
I mean, on the policy, the problem with that view is that then if you have lenient gun laws in one place and the next door neighbor has stricter gun laws, then you've sort of negated the ability of the state with the stricter gun laws to be able to really enforce who's bringing what into their state. I mean, I do think that it's interesting with Bernie Sanders that this is the one place where he hasn't been consistently on the left. I wonder if there's being too much made of this issue, though, because in a modern context, I'm not sure where he actually would differ from Hillary Clinton in terms of a policy prescription, which will be one of the things that'll be interesting to see come out in the debates.
Yeah.
And it's also a way for her to attack Bernie Sanders and his record without really directly attacking him and attacking policies that the liberal base actually supports.
Right. Anytime she can kind of get to his left without much political risk, I think she's gonna be taking it. Anyway, still ahead. Did Scott Walker accidentally let the cat out of the bag? And next, the latest on the potential deal that could keep Greece in the Eurozone. That's next.